Tonight, allow your thoughts to slow. Imagine a distant century, long before electric lights or crowded highways, a time when nights were darker and silence felt heavier. Across medieval Europe, the glow of candles flickered behind monastery walls, inside castle towers, and beneath narrow stone arches where scholars worked long after others had fallen asleep. These scholars were not kings or warriors, they were seekers. They called their practice alchemy. To many people of the medieval world, life felt fragile and brief. Plagues moved through cities without warning. Winters were harsh. Medicine was uncertain. Death arrived early and often, shaping how people viewed the passage of time. It is within this fragile landscape that the idea of immortality began to take root, not as a fantasy of power, but as a quiet hope for continuity. Alchemy was never simply about turning lead into gold. At its heart, it was a philosophy, a way of understanding change itself. Early European alchemists inherited knowledge from older civilizations. Ancient Egyptian traditions, Greek philosophy, and Arabic scientific texts slowly traveled west through translation centers in Spain and Sicily. By the 12th century, manuscripts written in Latin began to circulate among scholars curious about hidden processes within nature. These texts described a universe alive with meaning. Nothing was truly separate. The movements of stars influenced the earth. Metals matured beneath the soil. Human life mirrored cosmic cycles. To the alchemist, transformation was everywhere, in fire, in water, in breath, and in time itself. And if transformation was natural, perhaps aging could be transformed as well. Perhaps decay was not an ending, perhaps it was only a stage. Within small laboratories, often called workshops of transmutation, alchemists gathered materials that seemed both ordinary and mysterious: sulfur crystals, mercury droplets, dried herbs, fragments of colored glass. Furnaces burned slowly, releasing gentle warmth into cold rooms. Glass vessels clinked softly as liquids shifted from one container to another. The work was slow, deliberate, quiet. Before beginning any experiment, many alchemists practiced rituals of preparation. Some fasted for hours, believing that physical purity allowed clearer perception. Others copied prayers into the margins of their books, asking for patience rather than success. In these early stages, immortality was not imagined as eternal youth or endless power. Instead, it was described as balance, a state in which body and spirit existed in harmony with nature. A manuscript from the late 13th century speaks of a hidden fire within all living things. The alchemist's role was not to create something new, but to awaken what already existed. This belief shaped the earliest forbidden rituals, because while experimentation itself was not always condemned, certain practices blurred the boundary between science and spiritual mystery. Working at night, aligning experiments with planetary movements, or seeking secret elixirs sometimes drew suspicion from religious authorities. And so, alchemists learned to speak in symbols: a lion devouring the sun, a king dissolving into a pool of silver light, a phoenix rising from ashes. To modern readers, these images feel poetic, but for medieval practitioners, they carried precise meanings, instructions hidden within metaphor. As the candles burned lower, the alchemist would watch carefully, waiting for subtle signs: a shift in color, a faint change in texture, the slow formation of crystals at the bottom of a glass vessel. Time passed differently in these rooms. Minutes felt long, hours felt quiet. The outside world faded into distance. The medieval fear of time. To understand why immortality held such power, we must pause and consider how medieval people experienced time itself. Clocks were rare, days were measured by bells from church towers, seasons dictated labor and rest. A life could change entirely with a single failed harvest or sudden illness. The average person might not live beyond their 40s. And yet, within monasteries and universities, scholars began to imagine a different relationship with time. Influenced by ancient texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary figure believed to hold divine wisdom, alchemists saw the universe as a great cycle rather than a straight path. Birth, decay, death, and renewal formed a continuous loop. If nature could renew itself endlessly, perhaps humanity could learn to participate in that renewal. This idea led to one of the most enduring alchemical symbols, the Philosopher's Stone. Often misunderstood as a literal rock capable of producing gold, the Philosopher's Stone represented perfection, the ultimate balance between opposing forces. It was described as red like a glowing ember, yet cool to the touch, solid yet fluid, both material and spiritual. Some texts suggested that even a small fragment could transform illness into health and extend the human lifespan. But the path toward this discovery required patience beyond ordinary understanding. Experiments lasted months, sometimes years, and failure was common. Yet failure itself held meaning. Each unsuccessful attempt was seen as a lesson, a stage in the alchemist's own transformation. The ritual of silence. Among the earliest forbidden practices was the ritual of silence. Before beginning a new phase of work, the alchemist would remain silent for a full day or longer. No conversation, no reading unrelated to the experiment, only observation. The purpose of this ritual was simple: to quiet the mind. Medieval thinkers believed that distraction clouded perception. Silence allowed the practitioner to notice subtle changes that might otherwise be overlooked. Imagine sitting alone in a stone chamber, listening to the soft crackle of fire beneath a furnace. Outside, wind moves gently against narrow windows. Inside, a glass vessel warms slowly, its contents shifting color almost imperceptibly. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet everything changes. The ritual of silence reflected a deeper belief that immortality was not achieved through force, but through attention. By slowing down, the alchemist hoped to align with the rhythms of nature itself. Secret knowledge and hidden language. Because alchemy blended science with spiritual symbolism, many practitioners feared their work would be misunderstood. Some kings supported alchemists, hoping to produce gold for their treasuries. Others banned certain practices, worried they encouraged deception or heresy. To protect themselves, alchemists developed coded language. Mercury might be called the messenger. Sulfur became the hidden flame. Salt represented the body of the world. Even descriptions of immortality were veiled. Rather than writing directly about living forever, manuscripts spoke of lengthening the lamp of life or restoring the morning light. This poetic language served two purposes. It preserved secrecy, and it transformed the practice itself into a form of meditation. Reading an alchemical text required patience, meaning unfolded slowly like a riddle waiting to be solved. A night in the laboratory. Picture a young apprentice entering an alchemical workshop for the first time. The room smells faintly of herbs and heated metal. Shelves hold glass flasks of different shapes: round, narrow, spiral. A furnace glows softly in one corner. Above it hangs an iron rod from which vessels are suspended. The master alchemist speaks quietly, explaining that the work is not about control, but about listening. The apprentice learns how to grind minerals into powder, how to measure liquids drop by drop, how to maintain a steady flame for hours without interruption. Outside, the world continues. Merchants travel roads, farmers tend fields, bells ring for evening prayer. Inside, time slows. The apprentice begins to understand that alchemy is less about creating immortality and more about understanding change. But still, the dream remains. What if the right combination of elements could slow aging? What if the philosopher's stone truly existed? These questions echo softly through centuries. The first glimpse of the elixir. Toward the end of the 13th century, some alchemists began experimenting with distilled liquids believed to hold life-extending properties. Wine was heated gently until vapor rose into a curved glass tube, cooling into a clear liquid sometimes called the spirit of wine. This process, As the night deepens, we return to the quiet laboratory. The air is warmer here, touched by the steady breath of a furnace that never truly sleeps. Flames move slowly behind iron doors, glowing like distant embers beneath layers of ash. To the medieval alchemist, fire was not merely a tool, it was a teacher, patient, unpredictable, and alive with symbolism. Among all instruments, none held greater importance than the athanor, the sacred furnace. Unlike an ordinary fire used for cooking or heating, the athanor was designed for endurance. It burned slowly, sometimes for weeks without interruption. Maintaining this gentle heat required constant attention. Apprentices took turns watching the flame through the night, adjusting charcoal carefully so that the temperature remained steady. Why such patience? Because alchemists believed that sudden change disrupted natural harmony. True transformation unfolded gradually, mirroring the slow processes of the earth itself, the way metals formed deep underground, shaped by pressure and time. The furnace became a symbol of inner stability. Just as the flame needed balance between air and fuel, the alchemist sought balance within the self. Before lighting the athanor, many practitioners performed a ritual of preparation. They washed their hands in water infused with herbs. Some traced geometric symbols onto the floor using chalk or charcoal. Others whispered quiet prayers, asking for clarity of mind. These rituals were not always written openly in manuscripts. Often they appeared as small notes hidden in the margins, reminders that the work required calmness more than ambition. Fire as transformation. In medieval thought, fire represented purification. When a substance entered the flame, it did not simply burn, it revealed its hidden nature. Impurities separated from essence. Smoke rose upward, carrying what was unnecessary into the air. Alchemists observed these changes carefully. A blackened residue forming at the bottom of a vessel marked the beginning of nigredo, the dark stage of transformation. This phase symbolized decay, dissolution, and the breaking down of old forms. Rather than fearing darkness, alchemists embraced it. They believed that every transformation began with dissolution, a return to formlessness before renewal could occur. Inside the laboratory, this philosophy shaped the rhythm of work. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. The apprentice learned to listen to the crackle of fire, to notice when heat grew too strong or too weak. Even the sound of boiling liquid held meaning. A gentle bubbling indicated harmony. A violent eruption suggested imbalance. Over time, the furnace became almost like a companion. It glowed steadily through cold winters. It illuminated manuscripts late into the night, and it witnessed countless experiments aimed at extending life itself. The ritual of continuous flame. One of the most intriguing practices described in certain medieval texts is known as the ritual of continuous flame. During particularly important experiments, the furnace was never allowed to extinguish. For 40 days and nights, the alchemist or apprentice remained close, feeding the fire with measured amounts of charcoal. The number 40 held symbolic significance, echoing biblical periods of transformation and spiritual testing. Within the vessel placed above the flame, substances slowly changed color. Dark matter softened into pale ash deepened into golden hues. Each stage required careful observation. Some manuscripts suggested that the alchemists themselves underwent an inner transformation during this ritual. Long hours of quiet attention created a meditative state. Thoughts slowed, breathing deepened, time lost its ordinary meaning. And in this stillness, the dream of immortality felt closer, not as an escape from death, but as an understanding of life's cycles. The language of color. To modern readers, alchemical writings may seem cryptic, filled with references to dragons, lions, kings, and queens. But behind these images lay a structured system of stages, often expressed through color. Black represented the beginning, the breaking down of old forms. White symbolized purification, the clearing away of impurities. Yellow suggested awakening, the approach of balance. Red marked completion, the stage associated with the philosopher's stone. Inside the furnace, these colors sometimes appeared physically within heated substances. A dull powder might darken before turning pale, then gradually shift toward warmer tones. For the alchemist, observing these changes felt like reading a language written by nature itself. Each hue carried both chemical and spiritual meaning. Black was not failure, it was preparation. White was not perfection, it was clarity, and red was not simply success, it was harmony. Nightwork and planetary hours. Many alchemical rituals took place during specific hours of the night. Medieval astrology influenced how practitioners scheduled their work. Each planet was associated with a metal, Saturn with lead, Jupiter with tin, Mars with iron, Venus with copper, Mercury with quicksilver, and the Sun with gold. Some alchemists believed that aligning experiments with planetary movements enhanced transformation. They consulted astronomical charts, noting when certain constellations appeared overhead. Working at night also offered practical benefits. Silence deepened after sunset. Fewer distractions interrupted concentration. Candlelight created a calm atmosphere where subtle changes were easier to notice. Picture an alchemist standing by a narrow window, watching the stars move slowly across the sky while a vessel warms inside the furnace. The world outside is quiet. The laboratory breathes softly with heat. In these moments, the pursuit of immortality felt less like a bold ambition and more like a gentle curiosity. The secret geometry of the laboratory. Some manuscripts describe the layout of alchemical workshops using geometric patterns. Circles represented unity, squares symbolized stability, triangles pointed towards transformation through fire. Apprentices sometimes arranged tools according to these shapes, believing that physical order encouraged mental clarity. On the floor, faint chalk lines marked areas where vessels should be placed. Shelves were organized so that volatile substances remained separate from stable ones. Even the placement of windows held meaning. A narrow opening facing east allowed the first light of dawn to enter, illuminating the workspace at the beginning of each day. Geometry, like color and flame, became part of the ritual language. Nothing existed randomly.
Every object, every movement reflected the alchemist's attempt to mirror the harmony of the cosmos. Experiments with metals and essences. In the steady warmth of the furnace, alchemists experimented with combinations of metals believed to hold life-extending properties. Gold, resistant to rust and decay, symbolized incorruptibility. Silver reflected the moon's calm light. Copper carried warmth and vitality. Some texts describe the slow dissolution of gold into liquid through repeated heating and cooling. Though modern science recognizes the difficulty of such processes, medieval practitioners viewed them as pathways towards understanding nature's deepest secrets. Distillation became a central technique. Liquids heated gently produced vapor that traveled through curved glass tubes, condensing into purified droplets. Each cycle of distillation was thought to remove impurities, revealing a more refined essence. These purified liquids were sometimes called spirits, believed to contain concentrated vitality. The hope remained constant that through purification, aging itself might be slowed. The apprentice's vigil. Imagine an apprentice sitting beside the furnace long after midnight. Their eyes grow heavy, yet they remain awake, watching a vessel glow faintly within the fire. The master alchemist rests nearby, trusting the apprentice to maintain the delicate balance of heat. Outside, snow falls silently. Inside, warmth spreads through the room. The apprentice reflects on the teachings learned so far: patience, observation, humility. They begin to.
The night remains quiet as we return once more to the alchemist's world. The furnace glows gently behind iron doors, but now our attention shifts to another instrument, a delicate network of glass tubes and vessels arranged carefully upon a wooden table. This is the realm of distillation. To medieval alchemists, distillation was more than a technique. It was a metaphor for refinement, a way of separating what was essential from what was temporary. Through repeated cycles of heating and cooling, they believed that hidden vitality could be extracted from ordinary substances. The dream of immortality began to take liquid form. The birth of the elixir. Across Europe, manuscripts spoke of mysterious fluids capable of restoring balance to the body. These liquids were often described as clear as morning dew, yet powerful enough to awaken dormant strength within the human spirit. Some alchemists called them aqua vitae, the water of life. The process began simply. Wine or herbal infusions were placed inside a rounded glass vessel known as an alembic. Gentle heat transformed the liquid into vapor, which traveled upward through a curved neck before condensing into purified drops. Each drop represented a transformation. The alchemist believed that by repeating this process again and again, the liquid grew more refined, more concentrated, more alive. Unlike sudden chemical reactions, distillation unfolded slowly. Hours passed as droplets formed one by one, falling into a waiting container with soft, rhythmic sound. The laboratory became a place of quiet listening. Each drop echoed like a heartbeat. The symbolism of liquid light. Why did alchemists associate liquids with immortality? In medieval philosophy, water symbolized continuity. Rivers flowed endlessly, clouds returned as rain, and the sea held ancient memory. Liquids carried motion within stillness, reflecting the alchemist's belief that life itself was a cycle rather than a fixed state. Some texts describe an elixir of dawn, a substance believed to capture the first light of morning. Practitioners collected dew from leaves at sunrise, believing it held celestial purity, untouched by human influence. These rituals were gentle. An alchemist might walk quietly through a garden at dawn, gathering droplets from petals with a soft cloth. The dew was then sealed inside a vessel and heated slowly, transforming into vapor that condensed into a clear essence. Whether or not such liquids possessed real power, the act itself fostered mindfulness, an awareness of nature's rhythms, and in that awareness, many felt closer to the dream of renewal. The trinity of mercury, sulfur, and salt. Medieval alchemy often described reality through three symbolic principles: mercury, sulfur, and salt. Mercury represented fluidity, the ever-changing nature of spirit. Sulfur symbolized energy, the hidden fire within matter. Salt embodied stability, the structure that gave form to existence. Distillation rituals attempted to separate these principles within a substance, then recombine them in purified form. An alchemist might heat a mineral mixture until vapors rose, capturing what they believed to be its mercurial essence. Residue left behind in the vessel was associated with salt, while the energy released through flame represented sulfur. This symbolic language transformed experimentation into a form of storytelling. Every reaction told a story of dissolution and reunion, and through these stories, the possibility of immortality felt tangible. Aurum potable, or drinkable gold. Among the most intriguing alchemical ideas was aurum potable, or drinkable gold. Gold fascinated medieval thinkers because it resisted corrosion. It did not rust or decay like iron. To the alchemist, this suggested a deeper truth. Gold embodied perfection. Some practitioners attempted to dissolve tiny amounts of gold into liquid, believing that ingesting it might transfer its incorruptible nature to the body. The process required extraordinary patience. Thin sheets of gold were heated, cooled, and ground into powder before being mixed with acids or distilled spirits. Modern science recognizes that many of these experiments were ineffective or even dangerous. Yet within the alchemist's worldview, the ritual itself held meaning. Preparing drinkable gold became an act of devotion, a symbolic merging of human fragility with cosmic endurance. Gardens of transformation. Not all elixirs came from metals. Herbal alchemy played an important role in medieval laboratories, especially among practitioners influenced by monastic medicine. Gardens surrounding monasteries provided rosemary, sage, lavender, and other plants believed to strengthen the body. Alchemists observed how plants responded to sunlight, soil, and seasons. They collected herbs at specific times of day, aligning their work with lunar phases or planetary hours. Distillation of herbs produced fragrant waters, thought to calm the mind and restore balance. Imagine a quiet evening in such a garden. The air smells of fresh leaves, the sky glows softly with fading light. An alchemist gathers a handful of herbs, carrying them carefully into the laboratory where they will be transformed through heat and vapor. These rituals blurred the boundary between science and meditation. The search for immortality became intertwined with appreciation for nature's subtle beauty. The glassblower's art. As alchemical practices evolved, artisans known as glassblowers became essential collaborators. They crafted intricate vessels capable of withstanding heat while allowing observation of delicate changes within the vessel. Transparent glass symbolized clarity, the ability to witness transformation directly.
Some alembics featured long spiral tubes resembling coiled serpents, a design that slowed the movement of vapor and increased purification. Others contained multiple chambers, allowing liquids to pass through several stages before condensing. Each vessel reflected both practical function and symbolic meaning. A round flask represented unity, a tall, narrow tube suggested ascent, a sealed sphere evoked wholeness. Through glass, the alchemist watched liquid turn to vapor and back again, a cycle mirroring birth, death, and rebirth. The quiet risk of experimentation. Despite their calm intentions, many alchemical experiments carried risk. Mercury fumes, acidic vapors, and intense heat could harm those working too closely without ventilation. Manuscripts occasionally mention practitioners who fell ill, reminding readers that the path towards immortality was not without danger. Yet even these warnings were expressed gently. Rather than discouraging exploration, they emphasized balance, the need to approach experimentation with humility and care. An experienced alchemist learned to recognize subtle signs of imbalance, a sudden change in smell, an unexpected color, a vessel heating too quickly. Observation remained the most valuable skill. The ritual of repetition. Distillation required patience above all else. A single liquid might be distilled 10 times, 20 times, or even more, each cycle believed to enhance purity. Between each stage, the alchemist recorded observations in careful handwriting. Over months, these notes formed a personal chronicle, a record of transformation not only of substances, but of the practitioner themselves. Reading these manuscripts today reveals a surprising tone. They are not filled with urgency or ambition. Instead, they speak of calm perseverance. Wait, one text advises, allow the essence to reveal itself. Such words reflect the slow rhythm of medieval life, where progress unfolded gradually and understanding deepened through repetition. A moment of stillness. Imagine an alchemist seated beside a table of glass vessels, watching droplets fall one by one into a receiving flask. The sound is soft. The room smells faintly of herbs and warm metal. Outside, wind moves gently through narrow streets. Inside, the world feels suspended in quiet focus. The alchemist does not rush to taste the elixir.
The laboratory grows quieter now. The vessels rest on wooden shelves. The furnace breathes gently, no longer blazing but glowing with steady warmth. Outside, church bells mark the passing of hours, a reminder that medieval life was deeply intertwined with faith. For the alchemist, this created a delicate balance. To seek immortality was to step close to questions traditionally reserved for the divine. And so, as their experiments deepened, so too did the need for discretion. The thin line between science and suspicion. Medieval Europe was shaped by Christian theology. Life, death, and resurrection were sacred mysteries. The idea of eternal life belonged to the realm of spiritual salvation, not laboratory experimentation. Yet many alchemists were devout believers. Some were monks, some were clerics, others studied within cathedral schools or early universities. They did not see their work as rebellion. They believed they were uncovering the hidden design of God's creation. Still, not everyone agreed. Rumors circulated. Stories exaggerated their work, turning careful scholars into shadowy magicians in the imagination of the public. A laboratory working late into the night could appear mysterious. The smell of sulfur drifting through a village might spark fear. And so, alchemists learned caution. Manuscripts were written in allegory, names were replaced with symbols, instructions were fragmented, requiring interpretation by those who understood the language of transformation. The cloak of symbolism. A dragon devouring its own tail, a king dissolving in a silver bath, a queen crowned with stars. These were not fantasies, they were codes. The dragon symbolized cyclical transformation, the endless return of matter to itself. The king represented gold, the queen silver. Their union described chemical reactions disguised as royal marriage. This symbolic language protected knowledge from misuse, but it also reflected a deeper truth. Alchemy operated on multiple levels. An experiment could describe a physical reaction while also representing spiritual change. To outsiders, the imagery seemed strange. To practitioners, it was precise. The ritual of inner death. Among the most intimate practices described in certain manuscripts was the ritual of inner death. Before beginning a new phase of experimentation, the alchemist would sit alone in darkness, extinguishing every candle. They reflected on mortality, on the impermanence of flesh, and the inevitability of decay. This was not a morbid ritual, it was contemplative. By acknowledging mortality, the alchemist believed they purified their intention. The search for immortality was not about escaping death, but understanding transformation. After hours of silence, the alchemist would relight a single candle, symbolizing renewal. Only then would they approach the furnace again. This ritual blurred the boundary between laboratory and chapel. Fire became prayer. Observation became meditation. Accusations and protection. While large-scale persecution of alchemists was rare compared to other historical events, suspicion lingered. Some rulers accused fraudulent practitioners of false promises, particularly those who claimed to produce gold. In certain cases, failed alchemists faced imprisonment for deception rather than heresy. To avoid such outcomes, many serious scholars distanced themselves from grand claims. They emphasized philosophy over spectacle, secrecy over publicity. A trusted apprentice might study for years before being allowed to read advanced texts. Knowledge unfolded gradually. Trust was earned through patience. Alchemy within monasteries. Despite the tension, monasteries often served as safe spaces for experimentation. Monastic life valued discipline, repetition, and contemplation, qualities aligned closely with alchemical practice. In quiet stone cloisters, monks tended herb gardens, copied manuscripts, and studied natural philosophy. Within these walls, distillation of medicinal herbs blended seamlessly with spiritual devotion. The laboratory became another form of prayer. Each experiment mirrored the belief that God's creation held hidden layers of meaning waiting to be revealed. For some monks, immortality was not physical survival, but closeness to divine understanding. The Philosopher's Stone symbolized spiritual enlightenment rather than literal eternal life. Sealed manuscripts and hidden rooms. Because secrecy was essential, certain laboratories included hidden compartments or locked cabinets where sensitive manuscripts were stored. These texts were often written in layered codes, combining Latin phrases with Greek letters, astrological symbols, and geometric diagrams. An outsider flipping through the pages might see only strange illustrations, but to the trained reader, each image conveyed instruction.
A black crow perched upon a skull signified the beginning stage of decomposition. A white swan rising from water indicated purification. A red phoenix suggested completion. The language was poetic, but its meaning was technical. The weight of patience. The deeper the alchemist ventured into these rituals, the more patience became central. Years passed without definitive success. Experiments failed, glass cracked, mixtures spoiled, yet practitioners continued. Why? Because alchemy was never purely about outcome. It was about process. The steady act of observing, refining, and recording created a sense of continuity that transcended individual lifespan. In this way, immortality began to shift from a physical ambition to an intellectual legacy. Manuscripts survived long after their authors passed away. Ideas traveled across generations. Knowledge endured. The fear of hubris. One concern echoed quietly through many texts: the danger of pride. To claim mastery over life itself risked spiritual imbalance. Some alchemists warned that those motivated by greed or vanity would never succeed. The Philosopher's Stone, they wrote, revealed itself only to those who sought wisdom rather than power. This moral dimension shaped the tone of forbidden rituals. Before beginning complex experiments, practitioners examined their intentions. They asked whether their pursuit aligned with harmony or ego. This introspection slowed progress, but it also deepened understanding. The laboratory at midnight. Imagine the laboratory now at midnight. Outside, the town sleeps. Inside, a single candle flickers beside an open manuscript. The alchemist traces a diagram with careful attention, a circle enclosing a triangle, intersected by a square. The diagram represents unity, transformation, and stability. The furnace glows softly, casting moving shadows along stone walls. There is no urgency here, only quiet dedication. The alchemist knows that even if immortality remains elusive, the act of seeking has already changed them. From secrecy to legacy. As the medieval period slowly transitioned towards the Renaissance, alchemy evolved. Some practitioners began publishing more openly, blending alchemical philosophy with emerging scientific methods. Others maintained secrecy, preserving traditional rituals within small circles. But the core principles remained constant: patience, observation, balance, transformation. The forbidden rituals of immortality did not disappear. They adapted, shifting language and form as centuries passed. As this part of our journey gently closes, imagine the alchemist extinguishing the final candle of the night. Darkness fills the room. The furnace cools slowly, releasing faint warmth into still air. Beyond the laboratory walls, the world continues, unaware of the quiet devotion unfolding within. In the final chapter, we will reflect on the lasting echoes of alchemy.
The laboratory is almost silent now. The furnace has dimmed to a soft glow, and the glass vessels rest untouched, reflecting faint traces of candlelight. Outside, dawn approaches slowly, bringing with it a pale blue horizon that stretches across medieval rooftops. The alchemist pauses, not because the work is finished, but because a deeper understanding has begun to emerge. After years of rituals, of fire, distillation, silence, and secrecy, the search for immortality no longer feels like a distant destination. It feels like a journey already unfolding within each moment. The changing meaning of immortality. In the early centuries of alchemy, immortality was often imagined as physical endurance, a body untouched by age, a life extended beyond ordinary limits. But over time, many practitioners began to reinterpret the idea. They observed that every experiment transformed not only the materials within the vessel, but also the person conducting the work. Patience deepened, awareness sharpened, fear softened into curiosity. The philosopher's stone, once imagined as a physical object, gradually became a symbol of perfected balance, a state of harmony between mind, body, and the rhythms of nature. Some alchemists wrote that true immortality was not endless existence, but continuity through knowledge and insight. A manuscript preserved, a teaching passed to an apprentice, a quiet idea surviving long after its author had faded into history. The final ritual, closing the work. Among certain traditions, the completion of a long experiment involved a closing ritual known simply as the sealing. The alchemist cleaned the laboratory carefully, washing glass vessels and extinguishing the furnace flame. Ash from the athanor was gathered and buried outside, returning transformed matter to the earth. This act symbolized completion, not an ending but a transition. The practitioner recorded final observations in a manuscript, often accompanied by reflective notes rather than triumphant claims. Words such as continue, observe, and refine appeared more frequently than declarations of success. Even after decades of work, certainty remained elusive, and yet there was peace in that uncertainty. The legacy of symbols. As the medieval era gave way to the Renaissance, alchemical imagery continued to evolve. Artists painted allegorical scenes of kings and queens merging into radiant light. Scholars translated ancient texts into new languages, preserving fragments of earlier knowledge. Some alchemists embraced emerging scientific methods, gradually transforming their practices into what would later become modern chemistry. Others remained devoted to symbolic interpretation, seeing alchemy as a spiritual path rather than a technical discipline. The symbols endured. The dragon biting its tail, the Ouroboros, represented endless cycles. The phoenix rising from ashes symbolized renewal after dissolution. The red stone glowed as an emblem of harmony achieved through patience. Even as society changed, these images carried forward the quiet dream of transformation. Echoes in modern thought. Today, echoes of medieval alchemy can still be found in unexpected places. In laboratories where scientists refine substances through controlled heat, in mindfulness practices that encourage reflection and inner balance, in storytelling traditions that explore themes of rebirth and renewal. The language has changed, but the essence remains. Transformation is still central to human experience. Growth often begins with dissolution, letting go of what no longer serves us before something new can emerge. In this sense, the alchemists were not merely chasing immortality, they were exploring change itself. A return to the garden. Imagine one final scene. The alchemist walks slowly through a garden at dawn. Dew rests upon leaves, shimmering in soft light. Birds move quietly among branches, and the air carries the scent of earth and herbs. The garden has always been part of the work. Here, nature reveals its rhythms without effort. Plants grow, fade, and return each season, reminding the observer that transformation is constant. The alchemist pauses beside a rosemary bush, touching its leaves gently. No elixir promises endless life. No stone glows with miraculous power, and yet there is a sense of completion,
a recognition that the journey itself has held meaning. The apprentice's understanding. The apprentice who once watched the furnace through long nights now stands alone in the laboratory. The master has passed on their manuscripts and tools, trusting the next generation to continue the work. The apprentice reads the final page of a worn book. It does not contain a formula for immortality. Instead, it offers a reflection. Seek not to escape time, but to understand its rhythm. For in understanding, the spirit finds continuity. The apprentice closes the manuscript gently. Outside, the world continues to change. Inside, the laboratory waits patiently for new experiments, new questions, new moments of quiet observation. The eternal flame. Though centuries have passed since the height of medieval alchemy, the image of the glowing furnace remains powerful. It represents persistence, a steady flame that survives through patience rather than force. Many alchemists never claimed to achieve immortality, but they left behind something enduring, a way of thinking that embraces curiosity, reflection, and the beauty of gradual change. Their rituals, once considered forbidden or mysterious, now feel almost meditative, reminders that transformation unfolds slowly and often invisibly. A gentle closing. As our journey comes to an end, imagine the laboratory once more. The furnace has completely cooled. Glass vessels rest quietly on wooden shelves. Sunlight enters through a narrow window, illuminating dust particles drifting slowly in the air. The alchemist, and perhaps the apprentice, step outside, leaving the room in peaceful stillness. Nothing dramatic marks the conclusion, only a quiet sense that the search for immortality has revealed something deeper than endless life. It has revealed presence, patience, and the understanding that every ending carries the seed of transformation. The story fades softly here. The rituals remain echoes within history, carried forward through manuscripts, symbols, and whispered legends. And as you drift further into rest, let the calm rhythm of this ancient world guide you, a world where fire glowed gently through the night, where liquids transformed drop by drop, and the dream of immortality became a meditation on change itself. Sleep comes like a quiet flame dimming at dawn, steady, peaceful, endless in its own gentle way.